539 books have been longlisted or shortlisted for the Booker Prize, and I'm going to tell you my Booker dozen of all the Booker dozens. Now, I've not read anywhere near the 539 books nominated. I'm not an expert. I am merely a book nerd who is geeking out about books. Now, I've begged, borrowed, and stolen this idea from the wonderful Charlotte Malloy. She's pretty new to booktube and she makes some great quality videos and reviews from a variety of picturesque locations in Bali. Please make sure you check out her video after you finish watching this one. And if you're a fellow booktuber, I'm really going to encourage you to make a similar video to this one. If you like, I'm turning Charlotte's brilliant idea into a tag, but I'm not going to tag anybody because I want as many of you to do this as possible, because I want to watch as many of these videos as possible. So I guess I'm tagging everybody. Just to let you all know, there is a Wikipedia page with all the books long or short listed on it. If you're a commenter, just let me know your Booker dozen, your shortlist, or even just your favorite Booker book ever in the comment section. Let's get on to the books, and I'm going through them in the year that they were nominated, and I'm starting all the way back in 1978 with Bernice Rubens' A 5-Year Sentence. This is a black comedy about depression, about getting old, routine, and the grind of society and everyday life. Miss Hawkins is completely obedient. She has been since childhood, and she is forcibly retired. Once her last shift has finished, she will toddle off home and neatly kill herself. All of her affairs are in order, and she's eaten all of the food in her cupboard except for a tin of tuna, and that lasts for years anyway. Before she leaves work for the last time, she is presented with a 5-year diary as a retirement gift. And what is she meant to do now? You can't just kill yourself when you have a 5-year diary untouched, and hence she grants herself a 5-year stay of execution. She starts using the diary, writing out her days before they happen, giving herself orders and instructions, being obedient to herself. Whatever's in the diary, she must do. She starts out very small, but she slowly builds her way up to big things. She also starts to go on dates with this charming looking man who is, in reality, just a mirror with a mustache painted on it. This book is really dark, but it's also very silly. It kind of reminds me of that classic 1970s sitcom Reginald Perrin. It's very funny. It's showing us somebody who is suffering from mental illness, and it's very socially critical. It's so good at balancing the emotions of the darker side of mental health and keeping that serious, but also keeping the book light and enjoyable to read by interspersing humour. Jumping forward 18 years and we're going to the 1996 shortlist. A Fine Balance, Rohinton Mystery. A book set in an unnamed city in India between 1975 and 1977, the period of Indian history known as the Emergency, where Indira Gandhi cancelled elections, locked up her political rivals, censored the press, and oversaw quite a few human rights violations. This book is also covering an event in 1984. You either know what those dates mean and what those events are about, in which case you can focus on the lives of the characters and the plot, or you don't know those dates, in which case you will learn a lot about the history of India from reading this wonderful novel. Ishva and Om are uncle and nephew, Dalit tailors who are just trying to make a living, but they're not very successful. Manek is an engineering student from a mountain town in Kashmir and is living in the big city for the first time. Dina is a young girl who is abused and made to do housework by her brother, who also tries to marry her off to his friends. But Dina is in love with a local chemist. Dina's life is the story that brings these characters together. But in building her, Mystery could have written an entire book and just dedicated it on her backstory. She is the thread around which everything else in this novel is spun. Through these 3 stories, we witness the horrors and the bureaucracy of India, the exploitation of the lower caste, of women, of people from the countryside, the young, the powerless, beggars, and of course, we're going to witness corruption. Think Steinbeck, but dial up the emotions, dial up the horrors, and make it very, very Indian. Moving on to 1999, and this is our first winner, J.M. Coetzee's Disgrace. Whether or not readers enjoy this book is very similar to how readers pronounce the author's name. Nobody can agree. This is a book told in two parts. David Lurie is a professor of English at the Cape Town University in post-apartheid South Africa, and he uses that position to groom and ultimately have sex with one of his students. Is the sex rape? David is our narrator, and he certainly doesn't think so, but it's clear that we are inside the head of a very problematic and flawed man. The university finds out about the interaction and they investigate what's going on. In part 2, David travels down to visit his daughter who is working on a farm. At one point she is raped by 3 black men, and David pressures her into reporting the rape to the police, something she refuses to do. There are so many discussions that this novel sparks. There is the obvious feminist theme specifically around rape, but also around the role of women and the control men desire over them. Any contemporary literature from 1990 South Africa is going to talk about race and apartheid. But does David see the similarities between the student he raped and his daughter? And what do these situations say about how black people and white people are considered within the society that he lives? Coetzee is showing us the hypocrisy and the fear that the powerful has. Because David is our narrator and we see inside his head, this book feels all sorts of problematic, but it's actually showing us the cause of problematic behavior. The reason I think this book is so divisive is not its quality, it is brilliantly written, but rather, do you as a reader want to learn more about the privilege of a well-off white man? Do you want to understand why they're broken? Or perhaps do you already understand that? You don't have to like David to enjoy this book. In fact, I'd say that's relatively impossible, but you do need to empathize with him and sit inside his head, and that is not entirely pleasant. I'm going to jump forward 12 years now, and I want to acknowledge that this book, does have a modern bias. That's because my reading has a modern bias. And there are a few names we really associate with the Booker Prize. Iris Murdoch, Salman Rushdie, Ian McEwan, Beryl Bainbridge. And I have not included any one of them, but I have included Julian Barnes and his 2011 winner, The Sense of an Ending. What I love about this book is in the title. It is the ending. Barnes has really curated your reading journey around that ending. You learn about this romantic relationship and you learn about this group of friends. And it's all told from the point of view of a man looking back on these events that happened 40 years ago when he was in his early 20s. But his way of seeing the world is very biased and very flawed. He's really textbook unreliable, not because he's trying to deceive you, but because he only sees what he sees. And I found it really hard to figure out what was actually happening through this bias. But Barnes is slowly dropping bigger and bigger hints as the book progresses. The plot, the characters, and the themes of this book are really pretty secondary to what is really good about this book, and that is the craft. Barnes has written a literary fiction that is providing the same experience as a top quality murder mystery. You finally understand what's happening at the end, and then you have nothing more to read, and it's just this moment. Jumping forward another 2 years to the 2013 shortlist, A Tale of the Time Bean. Ruth Ozeki is my favourite author, and that's because she does so much in her novels. There's so many layers and so many things going on. There are so many different ways you can enjoy her books. This book is essentially about a Japanese-American girl, or maybe she's an American-Japanese girl. She moves from California to Tokyo. Her parents are Japanese and can speak Japanese fluently, but now has been raised in America and can only speak conversational Japanese. Once in her new school in Japan, she becomes the victim of incredibly harsh bullying, causing her to become depressed. And that's our first layer, told from the point of view of a diary, which has been read by a woman called Ruth, who has found the diary sometime later. Ruth shares a lot of similarities with Ruth Ozeki. Ruth tries to find out if the events in the book are real or made up, but often comes up against issues that make it impossible to figure this out. So she continues to read, and this is our second layer. Then there is this theme of time in the novel. The diary itself has been placed inside a cover of an old Proust novel for privacy. The protagonist's name is now. And there are a lot of these little playful references throughout the book, but it's also a very important theme. It's getting really philosophic. We don't know when Now was writing this diary, or if the events are even real or a made-up story. And it's asking, does our past self even exist? Ozeki brings in a 100-year-old Zen Buddhist nun who is lying about her age, which is clearly playing into this theme of time, but also Ruth Ozeki herself is a Zen Buddhist nun. So is she the old woman in the story? Has she inserted herself twice? Now is also the great-grandchild of the nun, and she visits her to get advice on how to deal with the bullying and the various other things in her life. So we can see that this Zen Buddhist nun is playing into all three layers that I have mentioned. Everything is so intentionally connected in Ozeki's book. There are so many ways to squeeze joy out of this, and it's not going to get you bogged down in thinking about it if you just want to experience a great plot with good characters. We're going to jump forward another 2 years to 2015, and this is our third winner, Marlon James, A Brief History of 7 Killings. On December 5th, 1976, Bob Marley was set to headline the Smile Jamaica concert. On the 3rd of December, 2 days prior, he was shot by 7 men. Marley still played a 90-minute set. The 7 men were executed. Hence the title of the book. However, this book is way more complex than the story of an assassination attempt on Bob Marley. James has added in characters, and in the writing process, one of those characters has really stood out and basically stolen the show. We have the story of a woman who just wants a better life and will do whatever she can to try and achieve that. And it's blended with this brutal gang story, and it creates this fascinating blending of truth and fiction. You know, some of the events in this book are true, and some of them are the author's invention, but you don't know where they start or where they stop or when they're based on myth or conjecture, and it just weaves this brilliant story. James is discussing Jamaica, political corruption and the ties to gangs. He's discussing gang culture, the life of Jamaicans both in Jamaica and within the Jamaican diaspora. And it's a Marlon James novel. He's including a lot of gay men and the complex feeling that black men have towards white men when they're having sex. There's a lot of self-hating gay people in this, but also poverty, police corruption, drugs, prostitution, family abuse, and the effects of violence upon a society. It is such a rich novel, and there is so much to think about. It really hits you quite hard. Jumping forward to the 2017 longlist, and I always think of Home Fire by Camilla Shamsi as a Woman's Prize novel, but most good Booker Prizes have at least one big hitting Woman's Prize novel. It turns out that this list has 4 of them. This is a book about England's relationship with Pakistan, Afghanistan, ISIS and Islam. The racial profiling of people that leads to extremism. It tackles how people are recruited, the bribery and intimidation ISIS use to bring people in, the leveraging of family connections, and it's all done through a retelling of a classic Greek tragedy. I found the insight into Islamic extremists both critical and compassionate, and it just gave me such a wonderful understanding of that process and how those people live and the choices that they face. On to the 2018 long list, and it's Normal People by Sally Rooney. Some of you will be thinking, 539 books, why did you have to pick Rooney? She's a divisive author, but I think she's super talented. And this is a novel that explores class and the advantages of a better socioeconomic background. A lot of people got this great big shock when Rooney revealed her political opinions in Beautiful World, Where Are You? As if she hadn't already made them well and truly known. Why do we think the book is called Normal People? I really like books that show the human consequences of political policies, and Normal People is a dissection of class politics. It's gloriously Marxist. The relationship between a lower class boy with an upper class woman is very symbolic, but it's also realistic and feminist. Even though Marianne is rich, she is lost, looking for meaning and a place in society and trying not to be exploited. The thing that I think makes Rooney so divisive is not the Marxism or the feminism, although that's clearly part of the reason. But what Rooney does is tap into the feeling of a generation. And that's why I think a lot of older readers and some men struggle with Rooney, because they don't relate to these feelings that she is writing about. Rooney is writing for the younger generation. She's writing for women. And while some people feel seen by her, other people feel excluded. I don't think that means if you're older you shouldn't try Rooney. I don't think we ever relate to a character's choices or emotions 100%. I think it's the combination of relating to, learning about, and empathizing with that makes characters great to read about. And Connell and Marianne are great to read about. Moving on to 2019, and it feels kind of fitting to include 2 books from this year's shortlist. And we're going to start with the book that won that year, Girl, Woman, Other, by Bernardine Evaristo. I love the story of Bernardine Evaristo, a creative that was doomed to never be successful and just write and do art and struggle, who had this great back catalogues of books, and suddenly she won the Booker Prize and she's getting all this acknowledgement that her talent warranted. I love years when the Booker does this. Rather than acknowledging a successful writer, it's changing somebody's life. This is a series of short stories that are all interconnected, all about what it means to be a Black British woman. All the characters are connected, but all the stories are personal. I love this approach because no one person represents Black British women. They're a diverse group: old, young, northern, southern, rich, poor, cis, trans, and so on. Evaristo is just such a talented author. You know when you pick up one of her novels, you're just going to get an amazing quality book. The other 2019 book is not The Testaments. I don't mind winding you up a little bit, but I don't full on live under a bridge. Instead, I've gone for Chikozi Obiama's shortlisted novel, An Orchestra of Minorities. I love Nigerian literature. I love miserable books. I enjoy sitting with characters who are flawed. Really, this novel shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Obiama has retold the Odyssey in modern Nigerian culture, narrated by a ghost, and is following a chicken farmer who wants to get educated and who saves a woman from committing suicide. What separates this book is the protagonist, Chigonzo. He is not an easy character to like, yet he is very easy to feel sad for him, to feel angry for his mistreatment, to feel angry for the way he acts sometimes, to witness all his sorrow, to understand why he is struggling within the society he lives and what his injustices are. Some people will cry reading this novel, and some people will be furious, but you will feel something. Moving forward to 2020, and this is the last of the 5 winners I am including. It's another miserable novel, Sugarbane by Douglas Stewart. This is the story of a young, clear, working-class Scottish boy, Shuggy's mother, Agnes, a proud, beautiful, flawed, depressed, alcoholic, single mother. I've said this before, my only real criticism of this book is that it shouldn't have been called Sugarbane, but rather Agnes Bane. Actually, this is really much more about the relationship between mother and son, a boy who so desperately loves his mother, and a woman incapable of giving him what he needs from her. Set in 1980 Glasgow, this is a picture of poverty and addiction, and how that affects both the current and the next generation. It's a real tearjerker of a novel, and much like Chikozi Obiama's novel, you'll support these characters despite their flaws. 2 books left, and only 2 years I can take them from, and I'm going for the 2021 shortlisted novel, No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood. Another humorous novel. Patricia Lockwood is somebody I would love to have over for dinner. She is just a cack. She manages to be funny while writing something very profound. Written in 2 parts, Lockwood blends stream of consciousness modernism with autofiction, and it shouldn't work. This sounds like a car crash of a novel, but the styles fit the storyline. The first half reads like a Twitter stream where the political is mocked, ignored, and blended with the personal. It is a commentary on our lack of connectivity within the society we live, despite seemingly being very connected. It's a commentary on distraction and control. The second part brings this crashing down. It's a conversation about abortion and birth defects, about love and children, and it's also about our civil rights, about what we're allowed to do and why we're allowed to do these things and where we were when those rights were taken from us. But also, it's deeply personal. Moving on to last year's long list. But before I tell you the last novel I'm going to include, stay until the end of this video because I'm going to reveal what my shortlist would be and what my book of all the books would be. Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies, Maddie Mortimer. This is a book about a 13-year-old girl whose mum has cancer and is dying, but is also the story of the mother when she was a teenager, and there is a third narrative, the cancer. Some people don't like the voice of the cancer in this novel. It does have a weird voice, I'll give you that. But how do you really imagine cancer would speak? It's also a literary reference to Max Porter's novel Grief is the Thing with Feathers, which is a nice little Easter egg and really fits in with the themes of loss of a loved one. It's also a good way of letting you know what's happening despite the characters not knowing. I also think that having this structure with two characters who have a lot of overlap in their personality because they're mother and daughter and they're of very similar age, that's a big risk and it's really hard to pull it off. I think it would be so easy for readers to confuse the two characters, but Mortimer leans into this weakness and makes it a strength. She's questioning the ways in which we continue to live after we die, our existence within the next generation, the similarities between one generation to the next. This also leans into the spiritual themes within the book. Mortimer is discussing religion and the afterlife, and I absolutely love this discussion of religion because I don't know if Mortimer is a hardcore strict religious person or if she's a hardcore strict atheist or somewhere in between. She's just presenting these ideas and showing us the importance of religion to some and the comfort that it gives people. This book is also about the importance of family, about leaving your family or loving your family. A book that will hit you with an emotional sledgehammer, but it is structurally really intelligent and thought-provoking. Debut authors shouldn't be able to write something this good. It should take decades of crafting your skills and abilities to do this. Mortimer was 26 when she wrote this. Fuck off. That's my booker long list of long lists. Please make sure you check out Charlotte's video, my inspiration for this video. Like, subscribe, and all those things. Bye bye.